Mr. President, next week, Oklahoma and the nation will pause for a moment, and we'll remember nationally for a moment on April the 19th at 9:02 in the morning. And some people will look around and go, has it been 30 years? And other people will say, what happened 30 years ago? Because it depends on your generation of when you were born and how old you were, or if you were even alive in 1995. But if you were alive in 1995, you remember where you were when the news came out that there was an explosion at a federal building in Oklahoma City. It was the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. A man who was mad at the government and determined he was going to cause an uprising of people to take down the federal government, pulled a Ryder truck in front of a federal building, loaded it with diesel fuel and with ammonium nitrate, lit fuses, and walked away and got in his car and drove away. As he drove away, behind him, the explosion went off. It killed 168 people, including 19 children who were in the daycare center on the ground floor. And our nation was forever changed. We pause every year still in Oklahoma. We've never forgotten. Every year we think about those who were killed, those who survived, and those who were changed forever. We remember every single year, as we will again this year on the 30th anniversary. And we'll pause to remember. The people that are around us in Oklahoma are our neighbors, they're our friends, but many of them are also survivors or family members of survivors or family members of those who were lost. There are still police officers and firefighters that have literally never been back to that location because it's too painful to be able to return to a spot where they carried out the bodies of their friends and neighbors. There are individuals that their family was truly forever changed, and now 30 years later, they still get together and talk and visit, catch up with each other. There's survivor networks that still engage and still keep in contact with each other, remembering what happens when out-of-control anger took the lives of 168 people. On that sacred ground, there's still a quiet reflection pool. There are 168 chairs there to remind people of the 168 lives. There's a phenomenal museum that's next to it that people come to literally from all over the world to study terrorism, domestic terrorism in particular, and to be able to walk through what happened in the crime scene and how it was so quickly resolved. We have law enforcement, first responders, families and communities that come from everywhere just to be able to learn and to reflect. There are children that survived the daycare center that are now adults. Let me give you two, Brandon and Rebecca Denny. Brandon was 3 years old, and he literally barely survived his injuries. In fact, doctors gave him a 10% chance of survival, but he did. As an adult, he works to still help and serve others. Rebecca, she was rescued from the rubble at 2 years old. She now has a family of her own. She speaks powerfully still about forgiveness over bitterness. They were some of those miracle babies that survived. Many of the children around them did not. This past week, it was really a remarkable moment that a lot of people in this town probably missed. And I understand, there's a lot of things going on right now. But on the south side of the Capitol, there was a spot of dirt that was dug up there, and a group of Oklahomans, along with the architect of the Capitol, buried a seedling tree. Now, that may not seem like a big deal on the Capitol grounds, but there aren't many trees that are planted on the Capitol grounds. Many of the trees that are on the grounds are 100 years old or some 200. This is a great historic place and a spot of reflection. But in one spot there, we just planted a tree. And you may say, what's the big deal about that tree? Well, If you're in Oklahoma, you already know the rest of this story, but I'd like to be able to tell this body the rest of that story. On April the 19th, 1995, when that truck bomb explosion took place and took 168 lives, it destroyed the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Across the street was the Journal Record Building. It just demolished a big section of that as well, blew out all the windows and destroyed it. In the parking lot there in front of that building was an American elm tree. It was a scrubby tree growing in a parking lot, and if you've ever just seen a tree in a parking lot, you know it's not usually the healthiest looking thing. But it was just growing there in the middle of the asphalt. But when the explosion happened, it literally destroyed all those lives, but for that tree, it blew literally every leaf off of that tree. But the force of the impact and the heat of the impact was so strong that it literally turned the tree. The bark literally that usually has this nice little stripe as it grows literally has a turning point in it around it. And everyone just assumed that tree's dead. No one paid attention to it. And in the year of the cleanup and of all the recovery and what was happening during that time period, no one paid attention to it until the next spring, that scrubby little tree in the asphalt started sprouting. And people were shocked. It's alive. And suddenly it went from being a scrubby tree in a parking lot that was just going to be cleared out to being a sign of hope. So we cleared the asphalt and everything else away from it. Arborists came and began to fertilize it and to take care of it. That scrubby little tree is now nicknamed the survivor tree now. And it is the picture of Oklahoma after that bombing. We survived. That scrubby little American elm tree is now enormous 30 years later. Its branches and its leaves spread out over that site. It is the shaded spot. And on the morning of April 19th, there will be survivors and families that will sit under its branches as we pause for 168 seconds and as we read the names of those who we lost. They'll be underneath that survivor tree thinking again of, we survived. We're still here. The term the Oklahoma Standard was born during that time period as neighbor helped neighbor. And as we cared for each other and for the people that came to our help from all over the world, literally. If you walk into my office, you'll see a picture of the survivor tree that's there. How does that seedling that we just planted in that survivor tree connect? Well, that seedling is a daughter of that survivor tree. A seed was literally picked up off the ground under that survivor tree, was planted and grown, and now it's about 3 feet tall. That seedling, that daughter, we just planted 30 years later at the United States Capitol, so that this nation will never forget the out-of-control anger that turned to violence and hatred. It is our prayer from Oklahoma that as people walk down the path outside, that they would stop and read the plaque beside that little seedling tree, that in the decades ahead it would grow to be a giant American elm just like its parent, the survivor tree, and that people would remember the lives that were lost, those who survived, and those who were changed forever. That's our hope. That's why that tree was planted on the Capitol lawn this week. My simple request from my colleagues, April the 19th, it's a Saturday. When it comes at 9:02 Central Time, would you just pause with us for just a moment and remember? Join us, because we will absolutely never forget. With that, I yield the floor.